Stop. Before this story begins, we need to tell you something. Every single player in Grow a Garden knows what a legendary harvest looks like. The golden glow, the particles floating up, the sound it makes when the whole server sees your crop and goes quiet. But nobody in the entire history of the game has ever grown what this boy grew. And the most unbelievable part? It started with a seed that didn't work. A seed that grew nothing for anyone. Ever. This is the story of a boy named Eli, and this is the story of what happened when everyone laughed at him, and then the storm came. Stay until the very end, because the last 3 minutes of this film will give you chills. Eli was not the best gardener in the game. He was not even close to the best. He didn't have the rarest fertilizers. He didn't have the golden watering can that the top players used, the one that cost more Robux than he'd ever saved. He didn't have a greenhouse or a scarecrow with legendary stats, or a pet that boosted his harvest speed. What Eli had was a small plot on the east side of the server, 12 squares of soil, a basic watering can, a wooden shed in the corner where he kept his seeds, and 3 plants that he had been growing since his very first day. A sunflower named Soul, because Eli thought sunflowers deserved names, and Soul was the best one he could think of. A strawberry plant named Red, very simple, very straightforward. Red was that kind of plant. And a watermelon that he called Big Mike, because on the day it sprouted, it had come up twice the size of any watermelon he'd seen. And Eli had said out loud to no one, okay, Big Mike it is. They were not legendary crops. They were not even rare. But Eli had grown them himself, from nothing, and he knew every detail of their growth cycles. He knew exactly when Soul needed water. He knew that Red grew faster on rainy server days. He knew that Big Mike needed fertilizer on Tuesdays, for reasons that Eli had never fully understood, but had stopped questioning. Eli's plot was the neatest on the server. Not the most impressive, just the neatest. Every row straight, every plant properly spaced, every square of soil turned and ready. His neighbor on the west side was a player named KingCrop_99. KingCrop had 6 legendary plants, a rainbow fertilizer sprinkler that ran automatically, and a harvest record that put him in the top 50 players on the entire leaderboard. He had never once spoken to Eli. Eli had never minded, until the morning of the auction. Once a month, a special event appeared in Grow a Garden. A traveling merchant would set up a stall at the edge of the server map, and for exactly 1 hour, he would sell items that couldn't be found anywhere else. Rare seeds, limited fertilizers, tools that boosted stats in ways that the regular shop never could. Players lined up, always. The auction was the event that everyone planned around. Eli had been saving for 3 weeks for this one. He had sold his strawberry harvest, his last 2 watermelons, even Soul's seeds, which he'd been collecting since the beginning. He had exactly enough coins for 1 item. 1. He stood in line and waited. The merchant was a tall NPC in a brown coat with a cart full of glowing boxes and jars and packets. He worked through the line quickly. Legendary fertilizer here, a rainbow seed pack there, a golden tool that made 3 players start bidding against each other immediately. Then he reached into the very bottom of the cart, and he placed something on the counter. It was a seed packet, small, dark gray, almost black, with no label, no picture, no description, just a single symbol on the front, a small white circle like a moon. "What is that?" the player in front of Eli asked. The merchant shrugged. "Found it at the bottom of my stock. Never seen it before." Starting bid. Everything you have. The player in front of Eli laughed, walked away. The next player looked at it, shook their head, moved on. KingCrop_99 glanced at it from across the stall, snorted, and went back to inspecting the legendary fertilizer he'd just bought. Eli looked at the seed packet. The small white circle on the front seemed to pulse, very faintly, like a heartbeat. He placed all his coins on the counter. The merchant looked at him for a moment, then he slid the seed packet across. "Good luck," he said, and his voice was different from normal NPC voices. Quieter, like it meant something. Eli planted the seed that evening. He cleared his best square of soil, added fertilizer, his last good fertilizer, the blue kind that boosted growth speed, watered it carefully, set his watering reminder. Then he waited. Day 1, nothing. Day 2, nothing. Day 3, the soil didn't even look disturbed, like the seed had simply dissolved. By day 5, KingCrop_99 noticed. "Yo," he said, leaning over the fence between their plots. "What did you plant there?" "A seed I bought at the auction," Eli said. KingCrop looked at the empty soil, looked at Eli. "That square has been empty for 5 days. "I know. Did you water it?" "Every day." KingCrop stared at him. Then he called over to another player, a girl named Sunnyfields who had the plot on Eli's east side. "Hey Sunny, come look at this." Sunnyfields came over, looked at the empty square, looked at Eli. "What did you plant?" "Something from the auction, a gray seed with a moon symbol." Sunnyfields and KingCrop exchanged a look. Then KingCrop laughed. It wasn't a mean laugh exactly. It was the kind of laugh that's almost worse than a mean one. The kind that means he hadn't even considered that Eli's feelings were something to think about. "Bro spent all his coins on a dud," KingCrop said, shaking his head. "Classic." He walked back to his plot. Sunnyfields looked at Eli for a moment. She seemed like she was going to say something else, something kinder. Then she just nodded and went back to her garden. Eli stood next to his empty square and said nothing. If someone laughed at your garden in Grow a Garden, what would you do? Tell us in the comments. We read every single one. And if you're feeling this story so far, that like button is right there. It takes 1 second and it means everything to us. Okay, back to Eli, because something is about to happen. Eli kept watering the empty square. He didn't know why. Everyone else would have dug it up and planted something else. KingCrop told him to dig it up 3 more times. Sunnyfield stopped mentioning it entirely, which felt worse somehow. But every morning, Eli watered it. Day 10, day 15, day 20, nothing. On day 30, a new player joined the server. A kid whose username was just Tom in lowercase, which Eli found oddly reassuring. Tom set up a small plot near the fountain in the middle of the map and started growing basic crops with the focused energy of someone who was new and hadn't been told yet what was possible. Tom walked past Eli's garden on his second day and stopped. "What's in that square?" he asked, pointing at the empty soil. "A seed," Eli said. "It hasn't sprouted yet." Tom considered this. "How long?" 30 days. Tom nodded slowly. "My granddad had an apple tree," he said. "Took 4 years before it made apples. He watered it every day." Then Tom walked back to his plot. Eli looked at the empty square. He watered it again. On day 43, he almost didn't log in. He was tired. Not game tired, actually tired. The kind of tired where you sit in front of your screen and wonder why you're doing this. He logged in anyway. He walked to the square, and there it was, the smallest sprout he had ever seen, no bigger than a pixel. A single thread of pale white green pushing up through the dark soil. Eli stared at it for a very long time. Then he sat down on the ground of his plot, which you could do in Grow a Garden if you pressed the right button, and almost nobody ever did. And he just looked at it. "Okay," he said quietly. "Okay."
You're doing so well.
The plant grew differently from anything Eli had seen. Normal plants in Grow a Garden grew in stages: sprout, stem, bud, flower, fruit. Clean, predictable, satisfying. This plant had its own stages, and they didn't follow any logic Eli could find. On day 44, it was a sprout. On day 45, it was 3 feet tall, with leaves that were deep silver green and perfectly circular, like coins. On day 46, it stopped growing entirely and seemed to glow very faintly when the server went to its night cycle. On day 47, it grew a bud. Not at the top, where buds were supposed to form. At the base of the stem, just above the soil, like the plant was protecting whatever was coming from below. KingCrop noticed. He came to the fence and stared at it for a long time. "What is that thing?" he said. "I don't know," Eli said. "What kind of plant glows at night?" "I don't know." KingCrop was quiet for a moment. His expression was different from the laughing one, more careful, like he was recalculating something. "When it fruits," he said slowly, "I'll give you 3 legendary seeds for a cutting. Good trade." Eli looked at him. "It doesn't work like that," Eli said. "It's not that kind of plant." He didn't know how he knew that. He just did. KingCrop went back to his garden without saying anything else. That night, night 47, Eli stayed logged in past the server's dark cycle. He watched the plant glow. It was a clean, cool white light, like moonlight from inside. Tom came and sat next to him without asking. They watched it together for a while. "What do you think it is?" Tom asked. "Something that takes a long time," Eli said. Tom nodded. "Best things usually do." Subscribe right now, because the storm is coming in the next chapter. And this storm, it changes everything. Hit that subscribe button and the bell. We drop a new film every week. You don't want to miss what's coming. The server event appeared without warning on day 51. A red banner across the top of the screen, pulsing. Weather event, night storm, 10 minutes, all crops vulnerable. Eli had seen storm events before. They were rare, maybe once every few months, and they were brutal. High-level players scrambled to cover their crops with greenhouse shields. The players who weren't fast enough lost entire harvests. Eli had one greenhouse shield, basic tier. It covered 4 squares. He had 12 squares of plants, and one of them was the silver plant on day 51 of a growth cycle that had taken 43 days just to sprout. He did the math in 3 seconds. He could save Soul, Red, Big Mike, and 1 other plant. That was it. KingCrop was already moving, pulling out a stack of premium shields, covering his entire legendary plot in under a minute. Professional. Practiced. His hands barely hesitated. Sunnyfields was doing the same on the east side. Eli stood in the middle of his garden and looked at his plants. Soul, Red, Big Mike, the silver plant. The wind was already starting. The sky had gone dark purple. The first drops began to fall. Heavy, oversized game raindrops that hit the soil and left dents. Eli placed his greenhouse shield over the silver plant. Just the silver plant. He looked at Soul, at Red, at Big Mike. "I'm sorry," he said. And then the storm hit. It lasted 8 minutes. The screen shook. Lightning cracked across the server sky in white-blue fractures. Rain came down so hard the visibility dropped to almost nothing. Eli could hear other players shouting in the server chat. Crop loss notifications popping up one after another. He stood in the middle of it and watched his plants. Soul bent sideways and didn't come back. Red's entire vine structure collapsed. Big Mike, which had survived 2 previous storms because of his sheer size, shattered. The greenhouse shield over the silver plant held. When the storm passed, Eli stood in his ruined garden. KingCrop came to the fence. His plot was perfect. Not a single loss. He looked at Eli's garden, at the wreckage, at the one intact square under the shield. "You covered that thing instead of your other crops," KingCrop said. "Yeah? Why?" Eli thought about it for a moment. "Because the others I can grow again," he said. "That one? I don't think I get a second chance." KingCrop looked at the silver plant, still glowing faintly under its shield in the post-storm quiet. He didn't say anything for a long time. Then, quietly, "I would have covered my legendaries." I know, Eli said. The fruit appeared on day 60. Eli logged in at his usual time and saw it immediately. The bud at the base of the stem had opened overnight. What it had become was not like any fruit in the game's database. It was white. Not cream, not pale yellow, not light green, pure white, like fresh snow, with a soft inner glow that pulsed in the same rhythm it always had. The size of a large apple, perfectly smooth. And floating above it, where the harvest stats usually showed, the number, the rarity tier, the market value, there was nothing. Just a single line of text. Unknown. Eli stared at it. He called Tom over. Tom stared at it. KingCrop came to the fence without being called. He stared at it. Sunnyfields came too, and then 3 other players from across the server, drawn by something they couldn't name. A feeling that something was happening on the east side that they needed to see. 7 players standing around one small plot, looking at a white fruit that the game couldn't identify. Harvest it, KingCrop said. Eli reached out. He harvested the fruit. The server went quiet. Not game quiet. Actually quiet. The background music stopped, the ambient sounds stopped, the constant soft hum of the growing world just paused. And then the notification came, not just for Eli, for every player on the server simultaneously. A gold banner, bigger than any event banner any of them had seen. New discovery, the moon bloom. First harvest in server history. Planted by Eli. And then, below it, rarity. Mythic. The rarest crop in Grow a Garden. Only one seed exists. It chooses its grower. The server erupted. Messages flooding in from players across the map. From players on other servers who saw the global notification. From people who had never heard of Eli, had never seen his small, neat plot on the east side, had never known he existed. Eli stood in the middle of it and held the moon bloom in his inventory. It glowed. The messages kept coming for a long time. Trade offers, insane ones, KingCrop's entire legendary collection for the moon bloom. Anonymous offers of thousands of Robux. Players begging, bargaining, demanding. Eli declined all of them. KingCrop came to the fence one more time. He stood there for a while before he said anything. I laughed at you, he said finally. Eli looked at him. On day 5, when the soil was empty, I laughed.
Let's do this.
I remember, Eli said. I'm sorry, KingCrop said. It didn't sound easy for him to say. It sounded like something he wasn't used to saying. But it sounded real. Eli was quiet for a moment. You know what the difference was, Eli said, between you and me on that day? KingCrop waited. You looked at the empty square and saw nothing. I looked at it and saw day 1. KingCrop thought about that for a long time. Then he said, Can I show you something? He went to his shed, the big one full of legendary equipment, and came back with a small pot. Inside it was a gray seed with a moon symbol. Eli stared at it. I bought one too, KingCrop said quietly. At a different auction, 3 months ago. I planted it. Nothing happened for 2 weeks, and I dug it up. He paused. I still have it. Eli looked at the seed. Plant it again, he said. It's been 3 months since I dug it up. Plant it again, Eli said, and water it every day, even when it looks like nothing is happening, especially then. KingCrop looked at the seed in his pot for a long moment. Then he nodded. The sea gives gifts to those who wait, not to those who are the strongest, or the richest, or the highest level. To those who show up every day and water the empty square and believe in day 1. Eli went back to his ruined garden. He replanted Saul. He replanted Red. He cleared the soil where Big Mike had been and started a new watermelon, which he immediately named Big Mike Jr., because some traditions were worth keeping. The moonbloom sat in his inventory, glowing. He didn't trade it. He didn't sell it. He placed it on a small display stand in the corner of his plot, next to his shed, the best place he could think of, where it could see the whole garden. And every evening, when the server went to its night cycle and everything went quiet, it glowed. Just like always. Just like it had on day 43, when it was just a thread of pale white green pushing through dark soil. Patient, steady, waiting to be seen. That is the end of Eli's story, for now, because KingCrop seed is in the ground, and Tom, quiet lowercase Tom, went home after the harvest event, sat in his own small plot, and planted something new. Something nobody has seen yet. And in the next film, we're going to follow him. Here's what you need to do right now. Subscribe, because Tom's story drops next week and you will not want to miss it. Like this video, every single like tells us to keep making these films. It takes 1 second. Comment below, what would you have covered in the storm? The legendaries or the unknown seed? Tell us. We're reading every comment. Every one.
And if you know someone who's been watering their own empty square, working on something nobody believes in yet, share this film with them right now, because everyone deserves to be reminded that day one is still day one. See you next week.